Hey, and welcome to the variable lesson. So today we'll take a look at variables in UiPath, try to understand what's the purpose of a variable, how you can use it, why you need to use it, and how to build one. So first of all, it's important to understand what's a variable in its essence. So it's a place, a container to store different types of data in order to be able to use it during the process based on a business logic. So it's just a container of data. Think of it as a box where you're storing different sets or different types of data. You have boxes for text, you have boxes for numbers, you have even boxes for dates, so on and so forth. There's a ton of types of data. We will dig into that in a different lesson. But what's important to understand now is that it's a box where you can store data, extract data, use it, and store in it any other type of information that you may need. And this box is the one that your robot will carry with him during the entire process. So at any point you can dig into that and retrieve the information that's already kept there. So in a nutshell, that's what a variable is. But let me show it even better in UiPath, so it's much easier to understand this way. So we will create a showcase just for you to imagine it. I will have two input dialogs boxes to retrieve information from a user, and once we have that information, we will compile it a bit, work with it, and get out a message for everybody else. So let's move into that. I will take two input dialog boxes. First will be first line of text that we are interested to retrieve. Let's ask a user, what is your age, for example? And we will need to store some data when the user gives us the age. And then for the second line of text, let's use a question which gives us a different type of information, like in the first one we're asking for age, which is a number. In the second one we will ask for text. So let's ask what is your name? What is your name? Perfect. And now we are going to print everything in a message box, but even better, let's create another variable to have a different way to take a look at it. So first of all, there are multiple ways to create variables in UiPath. So we will take a look at how we can do that. As you can see here, we have a variable tab. If you don't see anything in the variable tab, most probably you didn't click on a box. That's why you don't see nothing there. So be sure that you have something selected. And then you have here a variable. This is, I will delete just to have the chance to build it together. So I will create first one for the age. Let's take a look at what are the availabilities. So we have a name. We can add this variable a name just to remember it and be able to call it later on when we need it in the process. So it needs to be very specific. It needs to be unique, first of all. That's a condition. And besides that, it needs to be easy for us to understand it. Think about building a bot that has a lot of variables. Then we will need to be able to retrieve that from memory. So it's useful to have maybe a naming convention in place. That will help us to remember what it is. So at this point, that's the name. We also have a type. The type of the variable refers to the multiple type of information that can be stored in that. As we've discussed, it's Boolean, which is true or false, integer, string, so on and so forth, many other options. So what we're trying to retrieve now, it's a number, so it's an integer. Don't worry about what are the types, we will discuss them in a different lesson. Then we need to have a scope. The scope refers to where is this variable going to be used and going to be available. So in our case, we want to use it in the variable showcasing. As long as we have a very simple robot like this one, it doesn't really matter. But once you have a lot of boxes, you need to be a little bit strategic. So think about where you're going to use it and if you need it, because it can get very crowded in this table once you have a lot. So we want to make sure that you are using the lowest level, the lowest scope possible, and still have variables available when you need them. And as you can see, we can set up a default value, so we can take into account that at some point we want a default value. Everybody, if we don't receive a number from a user, we will decide that that user has 18 years old age, for example. So let's build our variable here. I will use an integer. That's why I'm using now a naming convention. So it's int from integer, and then I will take age. Perfect. So it's an integer type in the scope defined. That's perfect. So now we have something that we can use in the box. And now the value entered, it's integer age. What I just did now, it's use the variable that I have already created. In order to store in it, I've used a box. I've labeled it with age. Everything that goes in that box and needs to be a type of number will be stored in the box that we now call age, in the variable that now we call age. Perfect. So let's do the same for the dialog one. And I've said that there are multiple ways. So let me show you a different way in which we can create a variable. Taking a look at the output, it's actually the value that we see here. So it's the same place on the properties panel on the right. So I will now try to use this panel here to create the variable. So I will use Control-C or Control-K on my keyboard in order to have a shortcut and create directly the variable. Now, what happened here? It's actually I just need to name it. So it will be a string variable because I need a text, which is the name, and I will call it name. Perfect. So as you can see here, it appeared also in the variables panel. But what's also important to understand, it's the variable type that was directly assigned to it. As you can see here, the type it's string, because this is what an input dialog has set by default for their variables. Okay, there are different actions, and all those actions may have totally different variables that are set as default. So now we have a string name, we have a variable called name, and I've also added str in front of it just for me to remember when I'm looking at it in a much easier way, the fact that it's a string. So perfect. Now we have an input dialog that asks for a variable. It's age. Whatever I put in that box will be shown. And now let's have one which is a message, for example. So I will create another variable, which is variable message. It's also a string, so I'm trying to retrieve some text, which is important. And I will assign to it. So I have string message. What I want it to appear will be, for example, a combination between other boxes. So let's say that I will start with the name. So I will use string name, the variable name, plus, so the name, let's say it's Andrei, is, plus, we'll use the age, plus years old. Perfect. And now in the message box, let's use directly, we have a problem. So as I've told you, now the string, the integer that I'm using here as age needs to be converted to string in order to for UiPath to be able to showcase it, because now it was a bit unclear what I wanted from him. I was giving him a box that has one type of variable and combining with a box that has a totally different type. So we don't want to mess up those. So now let's see how our message will look like. So string message, it's the one that I'm going to take a look at. So let's play and see what's happening. Perfect. So what is your age? I'm 31 years old. And my name is Andrei. Perfect. So now we can see that Andrei is 31 years old. There is no space between Andrei and is because I didn't left one in the text. But as you can see, the box that's named age was populated with my answer. The box that's named name was populated with what I wrote with my name, and the box that's a message combined the values of those two boxes. Of course, that if we run this again, let's correct that with the is that doesn't have a space. Perfect. So let's run it again and modify the content of those boxes. So imagine that the user writes anything else. So I write 18, I wish. And the name is actually John. John is 18 years old. As you can see here, the boxes always so I didn't modify in any way what's the box. I've just modified the content of it. So that's in a nutshell what a variable it looks like. So it's a container to store different type of data. It helps in transmitting information from one place to another. It has to be a very clear name that I can use. It needs to be unique. The data that I'm storing in it needs to be consistent. So in the string message, I need to have only string if I want to showcase it in this way. If I want to use integer, then I will need to translate that to string. And the scope should always be the lowest level in order to be able to use them. So thank you very much, and see you in the next one.